Hi there guys. In this video we're going to have a look at some vintage sporting ammunition, some 7mm Mauser ammunition manufactured by Canadian Industries Limited, and it has their Dominion head stamp on it. This particular ammo was probably manufactured sometime in the 1960s, I'm going to guess, since I don't actually have the original box that it came in. I'll try to throw up a picture of what the original box looked like. This stuff is a soft point hunting round, 139 grain bullet nominally, and I've seen various muzzle velocities quoted for this as high as 2,900 feet per second. I have my doubts as to the fact that it would go that fast, but we will find out in a future video when I chronograph some of this stuff. Anyway, we'll have a look at the individual components that this stuff is made up of, and we'll measure its various components and weigh them and all that good stuff. So let's start off with the cartridge case itself. As you can see, this example is a little bit tarnished. Of course, this ammo is getting up there in age, but we've got a boxer primed brass cartridge case. Takes a standard size large rifle primer. I'm not sure if it's just the camera or not, but that looks like a fairly large flash hole. Anyway, the head stamp has the Dominion 7mm on it, and that's a little bit vague by today's standards because normally we would say 7mm Mauser because there are a number of 7mm and that could get confusing, but I guess back in the day when this was made, this was probably the only really common sporting cartridge for 7mm that most hunters would have been familiar with. So this weighs 165 grains, this particular brass cartridge case. I'm not really sure how that compares to other brands of 7mm Mauser brass, since I don't really have any other stuff at hand. Anyway, nothing particularly extraordinary about that. You can see the remains at the front there of where the crimp was made. We'll grab that loaded round again, and you can see that there is a crimp applied there, much the same as you would get if you were using a Lee factory crimp die. So it's like a 4-segmented type crimp that is crimped into the bullet. So, all right, so we've had a look at the cartridge case, we've had a look at the loaded round. Oh, further to the loaded round, you can see, if we can get the camera to focus, there's a little bit of a red tinge around the primer, and that's because these primers are sealed in place with most likely red lacquer. So, all right, let's have a look at the bullets. You can see these are a little bit tarnished because they came from some loose ammunition. It's a very standard style of projectile. It's a lead core with a gilding metal jacket. You see the exposed lead tip there, which can get kind of beat up. This one's got a bit of oxidization going on. So we've got a flat base, and we have a cantilore, which is a little bit different. If you look carefully, you can see that the cantilore is not a flat cantilore, but it's rather a kind of a tapered one. Towards the front of the bullet, it's pressed in quite deeply, and then it comes out at an angle towards the back. So I think this is part of the design to hold the bullet together after it hits a game animal. I would think the idea would be to help lock the core into the jacket. So as to how well that works, who knows? These haven't been produced in a long time, so you'd probably have a hard time finding anybody who'd shot a deer or something with these. I would think deer would be the standard size animal for a bullet of this weight, 139. You would go with a heavier projectile for moose or bear, I would suspect. Let's measure the diameter of this bullet, since that's one of the more interesting things about it. So we have got 284.5 thereabouts, which is right about where you want to be. I'll measure it in a couple of spots. So not quite 285, but it's hovering right between 280 4.5, and yeah, 284.5. Overall length of the bullet, let's see, 1.795 by the looks of it. But once again, that's going to vary a bit because these are lead, exposed lead tips, and they will be different from bullet to bullet. Probably be pretty safe to call it 1.08 would be pretty close to what an average would be. So these particular bullets, I've weighed 10 of them, and we've done the math on that for that. You can see the numbers here. Unfortunately, my computer printer is not hooked up at the moment, so you got to put up with my handwritten results here. So we've got an average of 138.8 grains, so pretty darn close to the 139 grains that these would be nominally. Standard deviation of 0.2 of a grain, and an extreme spread of 0.8 of a grain over those 10 particular bullets. You can see 139.2 is the high and 138.4 is the low. So not terrible for the time frame. People think of everything from the old days as the good old days, but bullet technology has progressed, and generally speaking, modern bullets are more uniform. That is to say, if they're of good quality. So if you're going to buy Hornady or Sierra or other name brand bullets, you will find them to be more consistent than this. So that's what we end up with for the bullets. All right, next up, let's have a look at the powder charges. So as you can see, hopefully, the charge of powder comes up about to the bottom of the shoulder there. So these are fairly full cases, which is good. Load density would be quite high as a result, and high load density is usually a good thing. So we'll dump this powder out and have a look at it. And by the way, the powder seems to be in good shape. There's no signs of deterioration, and the inside of the cartridge cases are still nice and shiny, which is a good sign. So we've got an extruded stick type powder, and this is most likely made also in Canada, because many of these IMR style propellants have been made in Canada since the 1940s. So this is hard to say exactly what equivalent this would be. Probably something like 4064 or something similar there too, although it would be a non-canister grade powder being used by a manufacturer. So really, you can only get close to what it might be, but you can't be exactly sure. Anyway, like I said, in good shape, should be good good performance still out of that powder considering the condition of it. I took the time to weigh out the powder charges from the 10 rounds that I pulled apart. So you can see them there. Our heaviest charge was 44.4. In fact, there were several 44.4s. The lightest was 43.9. That gave us an average of 44.2 grains, a standard deviation of 0.2 of a grain, well, rounded to 0.2 of a grain, and an extreme spread of half a grain. So once again, not bad, not terrific, but for mass-produced ammo of this time frame, we're going to say 1960s, not bad, and certainly good enough for most sporting ammunition. All right, let's have a look at the primer. These use a standard brass large rifle primer. You can see that red rim around the edge of the primer there. That is the remains of the sealant that was used to waterproof the cartridge case. Although they didn't use any sealant at the juncture of the bullet and the case neck, so just sealing around the primer. These CIL primers, CIL Dominion primers, are a bit unusual because they have a two-legged anvil. You can see that there's kind of two holes for the fire to come up around the anvil. Most primers nowadays use a three-legged anvil. So presumably these have a foil layer between the anvil and the priming compound, but I'm not going to go digging at that because that's just asking for trouble. Anyway, that'll conclude our benchtop look at this old ammo. Well, that looks like enough detail on this ammunition. All that remains now is to take it out to the range and see how it performs. Anyway, we'll save that for another video. Thanks once again for checking out the video, and as always, your ratings and comments are appreciated. We'll talk to you in the next one.